Jasper?
Yes?
What do you know about your cousin Alex?
Well, I know he ain't in Tupelo, Mississippi anymore.
Did he get? How did he get out? What was law enforcement?
Them aliens took him. You know, and I'm not talking about the ones south of the border. I'm talking about those other ones. You know, the tall, skinny, blue ones. You know, they kind of look like a blue tuna, except without the tuna.
Do those aliens really exist? I think that's just a fairy tale that the left-wing media has been pushing on us for years.
Well, you know, it's true that anything's possible.
But the more you drink, the more aliens you'll see.
I have a feeling, Jasper, that this is going straight up to YouTube this evening. You want to drink to that?
Here you go. Here's to Earth. Here's to all of us on the front lines, the back lines, and who don't even know we're in line. Well, I photograph much better in the dark, you know. I photograph much better in the dark.
All right. You got the giggles? Well, here, I got a couple questions for Mr. Collier here.
Okay, we're being serious now?
We are.
Okay.
So, Alex, you know, it dawned on me that 14 years ago, Easter weekend, 1995, that we last got together and did an interview of any kind. So,
I had no idea it was the same weekend.
Yeah, Easter weekend.
Wow.
14 years later.
An interesting coincidence.
Yeah, it is.
Well, it's a pleasure. Sorry it took 14 years to do it again.
I'm glad we're getting the chance today. Hey, so, you know, in the last few years, there's been an awful lot going on in the United States, and I think a lot of people have changed their view of what the United States is really all about. I think they've come to realize that some of the things that we've been doing, that we've allowed our government officials to do, haven't really been in our best interests. Well, tell me about your perception about the direction the United States is headed.
Well, you know, the country is always a reflection of its people. And it is my opinion that, yes, we have a governmental bureaucracy that claims to love America, but clearly by its actions and the laws and the way it's beginning to attack the citizenry, it hates Americans. But really, who's to blame for that? I mean, it's very easy to blame the government, but the government essentially is just our voted representatives. I mean, there is a bureaucracy around that government that manages and does the day-to-day grunt work, but essentially, you know, it's the Congress and the Senate and the executive branch, who we vote for, who we've put into office. Now, I've said this, back in the early 90s, 92, 93, 94, I was saying a lot of this was coming. And you know, really, who do we have to blame? And quite frankly, Rick, we have ourselves to blame. It's the citizens' fault. We abdicated management of the government to a group of politicians who are allowed to take campaign contributions from private industry, from corporations, from the military-industrial complex to do their bidding. We got on with our lives, I guess, mistakenly trusting that our representatives, when they took the oath of office, actually meant it. Obviously, they didn't. Because now what we have is a horrible situation. We have a government that isn't in any way, shape, or form a representative of the Constitution or even the Bill of Rights. In fact, those two documents barely exist at all. The government isn't acting like they exist, and they're going to continue to do what they want to do or what their bidding is, what they're being told to do. So let me put it to you that way, what they're being told to do. So, it's the people. We screwed up. We didn't manage the government. We didn't pay attention to what they were doing. As long as there was food on the shelves, as long as gas was cheap, as long as everybody was working, nobody cared. But guess what? Reality's hit home now. Now we have a government spending our dollar into absolute oblivion. We also have devaluation of the dollar. The chickens are coming home to roost, and now everybody's beginning to wake up and saying, oh my God, what the hell have these guys been doing? And, now we know. It's out there, and it's at a point where they're not even bothering to hide it anymore. So, what the question really comes down to is this. America is changing dramatically, and it's changing very, very fast. And it really comes down to a very simple premise, in my perspective. Do you want freedom and liberty, or do you want socialism? Now, there are some dramatic differences between the two. One requires self-responsibility and self-government. The other is you become a natural resource of the state, and they will tell you what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. And if for any reason at any time they decide they no longer need you, as Henry Kissinger so aptly put it, then we all become useless eaters. So this is where it's at. There is no really middle road as I see it. I think everybody waiting for one man to do something, for example, President Obama, to change the company, to change the government, to change the world, is ridiculous. He is just one guy, and the governments of the world are not run by offices, they're run by corporations. They're run by corporations, and those corporations are run by a program. And that program essentially has control of everything. It controls the money, it controls the technology, it controls the governments, it controls the media. And some of the personages within that program are not us. They're extraterrestrial. And I know many people will say, oh, that can't be, it never happened. Well, it doesn't matter at this point what they think. What is what is. And that's where we are. And now it's all coming to the forefront. And the next couple of years are going to be just the most interesting and the most full of growth opportunities for people. Dark night of the souls for many people. And an opportunity to not only change the way we live, but also the way to change our perspectives on how we want to live. And, really think about what really is important. Is it the money? Is it the dollar? Is it the big car? Is it the $1 million home? It isn't any of that. It's our family and it's our friends. We don't need all this crap. We just don't. What's important is who we are. Where are we going with ourselves? Have people looked inside themselves and said, I do all this work, I support all these other things and all these other people. Am I actually fulfilling what I want to do? Am I, in fact, following my passion? Am I truly happy with my effort and what I've done? Have I made any difference whatsoever in what's going on here in the world? Now, if you can be a clerk in a 7-Eleven and say, yeah, this is my life's fulfillment, well, bully for you. Great. But I know that in actuality that's far and few in between. People really need to start evaluating and get extremely creative and figure out what is it that they can do to fulfill themselves, to fulfill their dreams, to at least know what those dreams are and start going after it. Folks, it isn't about the extraterrestrials, though that's important because it'll give us a different perspective of who we are. Ultimately, when you come right down to it, the question that has to be asked is, who am I? What is it that I want? What is it that I'm creating? What is it that I want to create? How much am I actually valued by myself, my family? Am I loved? Am I respected? am I following my heart's desire? Am I spiritually evolving? Or am I just on this automatic treadmill that the media and the Earth's religions have put us on? You know, you feel good on Sunday, but by Wednesday it's just like, it's all worn off. And that's because it's not genuine. It's not genuine depth. It's not genuine happiness. Okay, it's instant salvation. And that doesn't work, you know. And it's not that anybody actually needs salvation. They just need to love themselves. And in finding that, and in truly embracing that love, that passion for themselves, and honoring themselves, you'd be amazed at how much crap that's in your life will just fall away. Because, you know, what isn't real will just fall away when you're actually on your path. You know, and I can't tell people what their path is. I'm still working on my path. But it's all about self-responsibility. And that isn't going to change. That's where the real growth, that's where the real evolution comes from. In America, we had that opportunity, and we did it for some time. But for the last 50 years, God, it's just gone downhill. I mean, we've had this incredible opportunity to change the world, you know, and now the world's very upset with us. And
Let's take a look at that for a second. Okay, Alex, you've mentioned that Eisenhower lost control of the U.S. government and that it really has never been regained by the U.S. people. And I think we all want to know, how did that happen?
well, that's not exactly what I said. He didn't lose control of the government, but he lost control of the technology. Apparently, you know, and this information's out there. Brigadier General Lufkin said in the Disclosure Project testimony, that's disclosureproject.org, which I recommend to everybody. You know, he mentioned that the technology was being reverse engineered, but it went black. And it went black very, very quickly. And it was really literally a matter of weeks that he lost control of where the technology was because it went black. And a lot of that had to do with deniability for not only the executive branch, but the government as a whole. Now, who's actually managing this? And this is where I think a lot of people are confused. A lot of people think that the government has this technology. The government doesn't have this technology. We paid for it, but programs have this technology. A lot of this technology was reverse engineered by programs created by contractors, government contractors who have this technology, and then a program was built above all of this, probably with the help of the NSA, because to this day nobody's ever read their charter, so we don't know exactly what they're mandated to do other than snoop on everybody, okay? That's where this technology is. It isn't that the government has it. It isn't that Obama can get his hands on it and say, okay, I'm taking it and I'm giving it to the people. It isn't like that at all. If you remember, Jimmy Carter tried to find out about extraterrestrials, and it was George Bush Sr., who was then director of the CIA, told him, sorry, Mr. President, your classification, your clearance isn't high enough. This is documented. So he couldn't find out anything. Bill Clinton did exactly the same thing. He tried to find out, but he was given limited information because he didn't have the clearance. Well, who can give the president clearance for this? Right? Who authorizes clearance to the president to know about this stuff? Well, if he doesn't know about it, then who does? Who's managing the information if the president of the United States doesn't have access to it? Clearly, there's your secret government. Those who are managing these programs. Because they have this technology that's thousands of years in advance of what we're using commercially. We have no access to it. Our elected officials have no access to it. The government has no access to it. Okay, but these programs exist nonetheless, and we are paying for this. Okay, the taxpayers. But we're not deriving any of the benefit of it. That is your secret government. Everything else is smoke and mirrors. Okay, what's coming down the pipe now is the fact that they have this technology and they're basically making choices. They're deciding what kind of society, what kind of world we're going to live in, who stays, who goes, What areas go through war? What areas stay in peace? Which natural resources are going to be taken over? All of this is being managed by the program. And let's take a jump back to John F. Kennedy. This is not something I've ever said publicly, but if you recall, one of the things that John Kennedy did, one of the first acts he did, was to abolish the Special Operations Coordinating Group within the National Security Council. The reason for that, I believe, or I should say I have been told, is that Eisenhower told him that that is the issue, that is the area where he lost control. So John Kennedy disbanded it. What's interesting is after he was assassinated, Johnson reinstalled that group. Now, who is this group? Who is the special group? Nobody knows. Nobody really knows who they are. Administrations come and go, but rumor has it they stay. They stay and they manage all the data, all the information, everything. For example, also during Kennedy's administration, he signed an executive order in June, 11110, I believe it was, executive order, authorizing the United States Treasury to print interest-free money. Started with 5s and 10s. That executive order, in fact, is still on the Federal Register and it has never been repealed, but we don't do anything about it. The government doesn't do anything about it. The Treasury isn't doing anything about it. Who is doing it? The Federal Reserve. And the reason you won't ever find the Federal Reserve being audited, or they won't allow you to audit it, is because they have created trillions of dollars to fund the secret space program that McKenna, this kid over in England, found out about. That's the deal. That's the reality of the situation. You know, and you can go pound your head on a wall, you can do whatever, but that's it. That is where our secret government is. It is there, it is real, and it's managing everything at this point. And they really don't give a damn what the people think. They really don't. They have their own agenda. And they're doing their own thing. We don't need the space shuttle. We haven't needed it forever. There are many people out there talking about special spacecraft, Tango Romeo 3 Bravos, Tango Romeo 3 Alphas, etc., etc. These are all very real spacecraft. They, in fact, do exist. And they do have some solar system travel. We are so far along, it's amazing. And in one sense, we can be proud of that, but in the other sense, where is the technology? Why isn't that we are still being strangled by oil companies? It's ridiculous. Because they fear an economic collapse. Well, we've printed the dollar into oblivion. The economic collapse is coming anyway. So why don't we just release the free energy and the technology that they have, you know, to power homes, to power cities. Let's just do it, because they're destroying the economy of the government, of the country anyway, by printing the dollar into oblivion. And that is going to happen. You know, you can't fix debt by creating more debt. Who ever heard of that? And then if you look at the history of economics, there is not a single fiat currency that has lasted more than 64 years. Ours is the only exception, but here we are. You know, here we are. We are about to hit the wall anytime within the next 18 months. So, again, it comes back to the American people. Ladies and gentlemen, what do you want? What kind of a country do you want? Half of you don't even vote. You don't even register to vote. So, literally, you folks have taken yourself out of the game completely. Your attitude is, it doesn't count, it doesn't matter. Well, you know what? You're right. It doesn't matter because enough of you aren't participating to make the change. We have still the ability to make a dramatic change in this country and to change the direction. We can go to our state governments and say, okay, you need to withdraw your support for the federal government. You need to hold them accountable to the 10th Amendment. You have to remember that it was the states that created the federal government, not the other way around. Okay? That's what has to happen. We have to remind them who's in charge here. The citizens created the state. The states created the government. Okay? It was a government of the people, by the people, for the people. Not for the government, not for private industry, not for the military-industrial complex. That was not it. That is nowhere in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights or the Declaration of Independence. None of that is in there. Okay? It was about us. And if we don't reclaim it back, we are going to lose the country. We're virtually there. In many intents and purposes, we have absolutely lost portions of our country. Who knows what's really going on? It's an absolute travesty. But instead of turning on each other, what we need to be doing is we need to unite. We need to come together with a very common focused purpose, not rioting, not killing. None of that has to happen at all. It's a question of just restating to our state governments, we want change. We want you to rein in this government. And whatever it takes to do that, you do it. And if all the 50 states got together, we could make this thing change right away. But that's what happens. Remember, the people created the state, and it was the states that created the federal government. It is not the other way around.
I want to know what involvement ETs played in Eisenhower losing control of the military-industrial complex.
I don't know that they had any control at all, or they intervened in any way. They wouldn't necessarily have to. You have to understand that this was something. If you look at the times where we lived, we had just finished World War II. We had the Korean War had just ended, and there was all this hype about the Soviets, the Soviets, the Soviets. So you had all these secrets, all this clandestine activity going on, and now, here you have several crashes of Roswell, Socorro, probably some others that have occurred, and here we had all this technology. There had been the 54 meeting at what is now called Edwards, so there were a lot of things going on. I don't know what all the actual mechanics were for how it just went black, but it went black. And probably whatever mechanism was in place that could classify these projects, or whatever group, let's hypothetically say Special Operations Coordinating Group within the National Security Council, all right? Let's say that they had the authority to classify these projects, these programs. Well, they classified it above and beyond anything that the president could ever reach. Right then and there, he would lose it. And that's how it works. Is it a good system? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Are there some things that maybe we should have been told about it? Absolutely yes. Are there some things that maybe we shouldn't have been told? I'm absolutely open to the idea that there were, especially from what I've learned from the A's, that there are some things maybe people weren't ready for then. I think we're probably ready now for a lot more information, but now they don't want to give us any information. I mean, now we're getting more information outside the United States about what's going on than anywhere else. Even other governments are very, very open. And here we are, the center of this entire thing, and we're like being led down this dark hallway, or how did Leonard Stringfield put it? A hall of mirrors with a floor of quicksand. That's exactly what it's like. That's a perfect analogy for this fiasco that's going on. Here we are, reverse engineered this technology. Here the American people have paid for it, and we know less than anybody else about what's actually going on with it. It's just, this isn't going to serve anybody. And if you're in a poker game and you don't know who the patsy is, it's probably you. And that's exactly what's happening here. We're in a poker game and we're the patsy. And that's what I know about it.
Now, earlier you mentioned the program. Is that something that elected officials created, or is that something way above the elected officials, above the entrenched military officials? What is the program? It's kind of vague, just calling something the program. Be as specific as you can to explain what you mean by the program.
Well, it doesn't operate like a government. It operates like an agenda. Now, exactly what that agenda is, I can't honestly say. But let's just take a look at where we're at. We know this technology exists. We have people coming forward. Again, I'll make reference to the Disclosure Project, another civilian as well as military people coming forward. Even other extraterrestrial groups who have been making contact with citizens of Earth in other countries have been given information regarding the fact that there has been the reverse engineer of technology. The Germans were doing it, the Nazi Germans were doing it, the Russians have been doing it, the United States government has been doing it, but we don't hear anything about it. Okay? It's a program, and this program is essentially above civilian everyday life. You have Corso's book, you have the work of Colonel Wendell Stevens, and all of the research that he's done regarding this, and many, many other authors that are trying, every day to put out more and more information and just, banging on the door, pounding the walls to try to get people to understand what's been going on here. And they deserve a wealth of credit for their tenacity and for continuing to do this work and to get it out. Like yourself, as a researcher, putting this information out, usually out of your own pocket. So many people have made so many sacrifices. They've lost relationships. Marriages have ended because of this focus on trying to bring humanity up to speed on what's going on with the program. So when we talk about the program is so far removed from everyday life on Earth that most people wouldn't even think it would exist. It could also be that the program really doesn't know anything about how we're existing at this point because they're so removed from everyday life. They're tucked away in very secret places. They're in underground facilities. They're tucked away inside mountains. They don't have intercourse or exchange with everyday citizens in a very normal way anymore. They're secluded. They're sequestered. They hang out amongst themselves. They're detached from everyday humanity. So it's almost like you have two complete different realities here, operating within the same space, which in fact is true. So, what is the program? I can't honestly tell you, Rick, what the agenda of the program is. But there's evidence that the program does in fact do things that not only protect America, but have also intervened. For an example, several weeks ago, there was an incident along the East Coast where many people along the East Coast, the eastern seaboard, saw a green flash of material flying through the sky and landing in the ocean. The backside on that is that a cargo ship somewhere in the Atlantic launched a missile to take out Norfolk, Virginia, and that it was a TR-3B that took out the missile. If that's true, and I give that a very high probability, then I'm okay with that. I'm really okay with that. But if you have technology that sophisticated, why are we spending billions of dollars on all this stuff that we don't need? Why don't we put that money back into helping small businesses and build the economy? Why aren't we taking that money to pay off mortgages? Okay, we have, 17, 18 million homes that are empty now in this country? Why aren't we doing something to put homeless people in them? I mean, there's a million things to do. I mean, here we give Wall Street, $10 trillion? And less than 2% of that is actually being loaned back to the citizenry? Enough of that. That isn't going to work. That's not going to work. And that's not what this is supposed to be about anyway. Okay, this is a government of the people, by the people, for the people. Not for the bankers, about the bankers, and only for the bankers. No, that's not what this is about. And it never should be about that. Okay? There has to be a paradigm shift here. But it's got to come from the people. All right? Instead of whining and complaining, take it back. Take back control. If you don't like what the government's doing, then you get involved, you vote, you register to vote, you do whatever you have to do. If you can't make a change in Washington, then you make a change in the local government. We have to do something, all right? Because we're out of time. We are literally out of time. And the program needs to somehow be brought back into reality. And I don't know the mechanisms. I don't know how we're going to bridge that, all right? But someone knows. Someone who's involved knows how to bridge those realities back into ours. How to take this technology 1,000 years advanced and bring it into the world today to not only help the environment, but to make us all free. Who the hell wants to live as a slave? Nobody does. No one does in the world. Every citizen wants freedom. Every citizen wants their children to grow up free. You know, my children, your children, the people listening to their children, at this point, their children will never know the civil liberties we know. That's a tragedy. That's a tragedy. And it doesn't matter who dropped the ball or where we dropped the ball. The fact of the matter is the ball has been dropped. And we have to do right now, we have to take it back. Okay, so the program, I don't exactly know how to answer that. I've given you the best information that I have. It's complicated. It is just so complicated, you know.
Let me ask you, within the last year, you've spoken again with the Andromedans after 5 or 6 years of deciding that you didn't want to be involved for a while, that you needed to focus on your own life, and you had other issues that kept you from wanting to be involved and be the public spokesperson and the messenger for the Andromedans. But in the last year, you've been able to speak again with them. Have they had any input for you that's helped you understand how we might find our way out of this?
Well, the contact that occurred was really about re-engaging. It was about getting to know. It was about creating a bridge again. It's important to understand that I chose to take the break. And there were a lot of things going on in my life, but I also, it became very difficult to walk the two worlds, number one. But number two, I had to do some searching. I had some maturing and some spiritual growth to go through. I had my own dark night of the soul, for the lack of a better word. All right? And I needed to go through those things in order to get to a place where I could create a new life for myself, a better life for myself, be more secure with who I am and what my place is in the world. And it was important for me to refocus on my family. That always has to be my priority. And it is my priority. The information that they've given us in the past, they've pretty much spelled it out. It's about taking responsibility. It's about advanced maturity. It's about taking time to get really quiet for one to hear their own frequency and to just engage with themselves, connect to their soul. You know, it's about not seeing yourself as a physicality, but it's about seeing yourself as a physicality, as a spiritual soul, as a totality, not just flesh and blood. You know, we're not some mistake. We're not some pool of chemicals that magically turned into this. That's not it at all. There is a grander scheme here. There is a definite, divine purpose for everyone that's here and other worlds. But it's up to us individually to want to know what that is, to search that out. And that's what it is. And you know what? You can't ignore it, because it's all the systems that we've created on ego that aren't real, they're all going to collapse because they're not going to survive, because they're not real. What is real? Okay? When you talk about creating a reality that is sustainable, is it about the natural resources? You know what? If the military-industrial complex, if the governments of the world were truly honest, we could change things within a year. We wouldn't be taking any more natural resources from the earth. We have enough already. It isn't about the population. It's about the fact that they can't control everybody. They're just spinning it. That's all it is. They're just spinning it because they're incompetent, because they're not capable of doing it, because this is not the agenda. This is not what it's about. Earth was not meant to be a prison, and we were not meant to be slaves on our own home. That isn't going to work. Okay? But at the same time, we have to step up as people, as fathers, as brothers, as sisters, as husbands, as wives. We have to step up. As citizens, we have to step up and take responsibility. And we have to be really clear about what our priorities are, and about what's right. I have a great respect for anybody who's in the armed forces, but it's important to note, especially to the young people, when you became the soldier, you did not surrender the citizen. You are still a citizen. And when you finish your tour and you get out of the service, guess what? You're a citizen again. So whatever rights you took away from people, guess what? When you become a citizen, you've lost those rights too. Okay? It's important to remember that. What are you doing when you take an order? Is it good? Is it the right thing to do? Because it will come back to haunt you. And we can't turn on each other. That is not what this is about. This is about standing tall and standing together and making sure that we move with a common purpose. It's not about creating a civil war. We don't need any of that. Okay, people will want to do that because they're so angry. They want to just lash out in furious and anger. Take that constructive energy, take that anger, and do something really positive with it. You don't have to destroy. That's only going to create more polarity and make things 100 times worse. And it only takes the healing that much longer. We're out of time. We've got massive changes coming on a consciousness and on a physical level to the earth and to ourselves. We've got to stop. We've got to stop playing this game. We just have to stop playing this game. It's crazy. It's crazy making. I need a break.
All right, just as a reminder, we're doing this filming in a family setting, so there might be some ambient background family noises.
Right.
How will the movement of our solar system through the galactic plane affect our solar system and Earth and us here on Earth?
Well, I wasn't alive the last time that actually happened, but here's what I've been told. One of the biggest concerns is that it has a very, very strong gravitational field. It also has a magnetic field. It's also an area, because of its magnetic field, where there's a considerable amount of debris. And as our solar system and everything in the galaxy revolves around it, okay, while we're also going around in the circle, it is not an actual complete elliptical circle. We move in a downward and an upward thrust, which takes approximately, from what I understand, 12,600 years, where things go up and then they come back down. It is the crossing the galactic plane that the A's, Morine and Visayas, were specifically really worried about Earth, in the fact that it was their opinion, based on their own science, that when the Earth hits the galactic plane, the Earth itself would bounce off that gravitational field, causing a great deal of Earth changes, where every coastline on the planet would be changed from the bouncing before we were able to move through. That's my understanding. I don't know if it's going to cause a physical pole shift or not. That is always a possibility. We do know from the geological record that that's happened. I don't know that that's going to occur this time. However, they were greatly concerned again, and I want to reiterate this, that every coastline on the planet would be changed. So, take that for what it's worth.
Now, you've said that there are an enormous amount of benevolent ETs helping us. What are the primary actions they're taking to help Earth humanity, and will their actions be enough?
I can't say that I know specifically and exactly what every intervention has been. I do know that there have been. And will it be enough? I don't know, Rick. I would assume that they're making an investment here of their time and their energy to help us get through these dramatic stages, to get through these challenges, these moments of growth that we obviously have to go through, because here they are right in front of us. So we can just hope and have faith.
For people who are afraid that they won't survive during any Earth changes, what spiritual or philosophical view have the Andromedans shared with you that you think may help people to overcome their fears?
If you go to Defending Sacred Ground, there's a lot of knowledge that they've imparted. One of the essays in regards to fear is one. The other essay, the isness, worshiping the isness, a relationship to the isness. There's an awful lot of wisdom that they have imparted, but you know, they've always called this time coming the moment of advanced maturity. So I don't necessarily know how to answer that question. I know that I'm not going to be living on the coastline. You know, I'm going to be moving to the Rocky Mountains, to areas along the Colorado Plateau. That's where I'm going to be, at least here in North America. So everybody, you know, people have to listen to themselves. They have to get their own guidance. You know, this isn't about, you know, saviors. This is about everybody becoming their own Christed being and figuring it out and listening and tuning in and figuring out, you know, what they're supposed to do, where they're supposed to be. You know, that's the purpose of maturity, is to get to that place. You know, for example, Rick, we can go back to the question that I asked many, many years ago, what was going to happen to us? You know, and the response was to become totally self-confident and free, to unconditionally be responsible for oneself without being coerced to accept some higher authority. And that's it. That's the essence of advanced maturity, is getting to that place and just knowing. Just knowing. You know, and I'm not here to teach people that. You know, that's I never would have signed up for that. You know, not the way, you know, the Earth civilization has treated its, those kind of teachers. They've been ruthless with them. I never would have volunteered for something like that.
In terms of survival, though, we talked a little last evening about it, and you said survival is a false premise. What did you mean by that? In a spiritual sense.
In a spiritual sense, the physicality is just a moment. You're here, the only reason you experience physicality is to learn lessons, to gather knowledge, to experience all kinds of things, from spiritual, emotional, mental, physical, to gather data to educate your soul. I know a lot of people have a very difficult time with the concept of reincarnation, but I have absolutely no doubt that that is the way that it is. That we don't die when our physical body stops working. We move on. We go somewhere else, and many of us come back, and we live again, and we learn different lessons and create different scenarios to provide us with the lessons of knowledge that we want in order to educate our soul. This isn't new knowledge. People long before, for thousands of years, have been talking about this. And the reason I believe that those kind of teachings have persisted is because they're right. And it doesn't make sense to me. It would never make sense to me if I were the creator of all to give people, souls, one lifetime, 70 some odd years, on this planet to figure it all out, to get it right. That'd be impossible. It would absolutely be impossible to do. Especially when it's as screwed up and twisted as it is.
So to kill in order to survive doesn't make sense in terms of...
No, it doesn't make sense, because the whole idea of advanced maturity, moving into spiritual advanced maturity, is to learn how to create love. Because that's the ultimate lesson here, is you create love, you leave a legacy of love. Nothing else is real. It just doesn't stick. It doesn't... it seems real because you have so much emotion tied to it, but it isn't real. It doesn't last. The effects of it don't really last. It's a difficult thing to explain, and I wasn't actually prepared for the question.
That's all right.
So you slipped that in there. But that's about all I can say on it at the moment.
Alex, what did you mean when you talk about our human DNA unlocking?
My understanding from the A's is that certain cosmic events were going to occur and or could be manipulated by benevolent extraterrestrials, where they apparently have some technology that would allow cellular memory to release within our body. And somehow that would create a reaction of total physical remembrance, not only for the body, but also for the mind and for the soul. Now you see, when the soul attaches itself to the body before birth, it attaches to the central nervous system. All right? Now that is where apparently we have, that's the soul's connection to the body. That's where it connects. We have all kinds of cellular memory within our body. Our DNA, it passes from generation to generation to generation to generation. Now, our subconscious mind knows a lot of this, but our conscious mind doesn't. And then there's a lot that's in there that neither can recognize, so basically it's dismissed. But the body has memory. The cells have memory, which they call cellular memory. And apparently the body knows how to heal itself, can heal itself. It can create physical changes on its own if it's just allowed to or given a command to do so. And my understanding is that we are coming to that point where things like that are going to begin to happen. We already know that there are children being born in the world today that have 3 strands of DNA, some even more. Has there been tampering? Has there been intervention? In some cases, I would have to say probably yes, but in other cases, I would say no. It's the body beginning to overcome all of its limitations because of a desire to continue to thrive. The body will make adjustments, which is why so many different races are so interested in us, because our bodies are incredibly adaptable to environments and changes, regardless of the fact that we've been manipulated. We're very strong, and our desire to continue to live is very, very strong. And that's not simply just will, that's also the body wanting to continue. So that's what I have to say about that.
Alex, I got a tough question for you. How do you answer skeptics who cite a number of predictions that you've made in the past about future events that have failed to come to pass when you suggested they would?
Well, first, Rick, I'm glad a lot of them didn't happen, quite frankly. I think we would be in a very different world than we are today. Number 2, many of those possible events, when they were presented to me, were presented as possibilities, or a very strong probability. In my immaturity, when lecturing and putting this information out in the 90s, I was running a lot of fear. I was being harassed by governmental agencies. I was being followed. My phones were tapped. There were a lot of things going on. I was losing jobs left and right because I was putting out this type of information. There were a lot of things going on in my life at the time. I'm the only one who could take responsibility for that. If I had to do one thing over, I would have taken those possibilities and I would have presented them more, or try to present them more in a positive light and say, this is a possibility, this is a probability that they said could occur here and here and here. Now I know several of the events did not occur because of intervention. I know that. And intervention is still occurring, okay? And I'm thrilled that they didn't happen. For the others, I don't know. I don't know if it was consciousness. I don't know if people being aware of the possibility of the events and they prayed, they saw a different outcome. I simply don't have that answer. I don't know. But of course it's something that you have to look at, and the criticism is justifiable.
Is there one example you can give me of where an intervention occurred that changed one of those events that you had?
Nuclear weapons detonation. There's been lots of intervention that has occurred, and I can tell you, as of 4 weeks ago, there was still intervention going on in that regard. And that's a fact.
Thank God for it. Now, is it wise for anyone to try to predict future events? Would you do it again, or would you advise anybody else who's in contact with ETs to predict future events, or is that something that you consider unwise at this point?
I'm still growing. I'm still learning. I'm still maturing, I hope. As far as wise, what it tells us is that the future is never set, which means to me we can create anything that we want as long as we all, or a majority of us, have a very focused intent. That's what that tells me. And I'm extremely encouraged by that if we can get enough people together to decide on what kind of a future, what kind of a life and planet we want. I mean, this is clearly, the law of attraction at work here. The future's not set. It could also be that maybe these things coming up in 2012 with the bouncing off the galactic plane, maybe if enough of us get really focused and we surround the earth with enough love and energy that nothing will happen. I don't have those answers. I just don't. Everybody thinks, God, you've been talking to extraterrestrials for 35, 38 years. You've got all this knowledge. That's true, but I have just as many questions as well. Some of the conversations we've had have been extremely one-sided, where I'm shared information and I'm not able to ask enough questions. So.
You're just human.
Yes, more so than ever. More so than ever.
There's a episode in George Washington's life that has a lot of meaning to you. The third trial of George Washington, his vision at Valley Forge. Why is that so important to you?
Well, when I was a little boy, I always had a thing for George Washington. My dad took us to Mount Vernon, and I just loved it. And I can remember sitting in his backyard, looking down the Potomac. And you know how you just know you've been there before? I'd been there before. And I was extremely moved by that. And it's hard to put into words. Well, when I started talking to the A's, Morine and Phaseus were very adamant about me studying that and looking up that prophecy. And I've asked, and they just said, well, it could be very, very important in America's future, especially the direction that it's moving now. That this could be a probability. So I studied it because they know that I have a passion for the founding of the United States and especially the principles for which it was founded on. A constitutional republic, a Bill of Rights, because those documents and America literally created a new domain of knowing that wasn't here in the world before. Before, it was always aristocrats and monarchies that ruled the world, and governments. And America changed that now forever. So I saw that, and I recognized that as a little boy as an amazing turning point. And the more I learned from the A's, the more I realized how important that actually was for humanity, to actually have the opportunity of self-government. Unfortunately, there's been a tremendous amount of negative intervention, and they know us probably better than we know ourselves, and they've been able to lull us back into sleep, lull us back into consumerism, into forgetfulness by dumbing down everybody through our school systems. And now they don't even really teach any of that. So they felt very importantly to let me know about that. And if you look at the third trial, it's a remarkable event. I certainly hope it doesn't happen. I don't want it to happen. But I just shared that with you because I thought it was important that, that they would not only come this way, but they would be adamant that I research that and I look into it. So that's why I shared it with you. I mean, it was something that was shared, I think, in 1834 or 1838. And talked about the founding of the United States, talked about the Civil War, and then the third trial. And what's interesting is, these are events that have occurred, that did occur after that. It also, if you look at the third trial, it's very close to where the world is today.
And what is the essence of that third trial?
That essentially the world becomes polarized against the United States and comes after the United States. And if you look at the actions of our government and our banking system today, you can absolutely see some parallels. And the fact that, our government is gearing up for a third world war, that there are people in the administration presently who really would love to isolate Russia in world politics, using the rest of the world, especially pitting China against Russia, and in the Obama administration, there's a lot there. It wouldn't take much for something like this to occur. And it's worth noting, if nothing else.
For Americans, is there anything in your mind that we can do to help?
For Americans, I mean, we have to practice self-government. I mean, if I would say anything, I would say go to the library, go online, and the first thing you should do is read out loud the Declaration of Independence. Tell me if that doesn't make sense today, as it did then. You know, just replace King George with the Federal Reserve. Tell me if it doesn't make any sense. You know, start there. Remember who you are. You know, that's the birth certificate, the Declaration of Independence. It's all about remembering who you are and then getting fired up and saying, you know what? Yeah, we've got to do something, because our generation, we cannot drop the ball. We cannot saddle our children and our grandchildren with a horrible socialism that infallibly will move into fascism, corporate fascism. We just simply can't do that. It is unconscionable for us to just do nothing. We have to do something, because future generations will be livid with us if we don't do something. You know, and this is our time to basically set things right. You know, and again, I want to stress, this isn't really so much about the government as it is the program. And the program is running over the entire world. It's just right now, in order to set up a global world government, we're at the target. America is in the crosshairs. And, you know, we need to create our own crosshairs and focus them back on them.
You've said that this conflict over Earth is being very well managed by both opposing forces of ETs, the benevolents and the regressives. What do you mean by this?
Well, we don't see any of it. You know, we don't see the open warfare or the clashes that are occurring, simply because it's being so managed that it's out of our sight. You know, some of it is actually taking place on a higher dimensional frequency that we don't actually see it. But there have been incursions into third density, you know, that we are in fact aware of, which is why there have been recovered crashes, you know, because they've been shot down. So it's being well managed, both sides, so both sides can do what they want to do, and at the same time we're being allowed to move in a specific direction.
Okay, now I got a tough one here. We're not trying to contradict anybody else's belief system here. We're just speaking about the Andromedans. But according to the Andromedans, in our ancient past, Earth was moved by the Pleiadians. How did they do this? And why is this important? And also, why is it so controversial?
What is so controversial?
Well, the concept that the Pleiadians are imperfect, that they've made mistakes in the past.
Well, they've all made mistakes. I mean, that's called growth. That's called maturity. You know, you don't know the right things until you've done the wrong things. You don't know the path until you've experimented with different logic, different ideas, different philosophies, different methods of implementation of thought and creation and worship. I mean, you know, that's what life was created for. That's what physicality was created for, was to experiment, to enrich our lives with experience, and, you know, to worship the extraterrestrials as our ancestors did in the very, very ancient past. It would be stupid. It would be the wrong thing to do. And the reason for that is this. Yes, they have incredible technology. Yes, they have enormous wisdom about space, about life, and there's a zillion things they could teach us. But they have gotten there the same way we're getting there, by making mistakes. That doesn't mean they're gods. That doesn't mean you bow down and you worship them. They have made their mistakes, and in many of them they're still making mistakes. Now, the reason you've asked the question, obviously, is that the A's have been somewhat critical of the mistakes the Pleiadians have made in the past here on Earth. And one of the things that they have said to me was that the reason they're involved now is to help the Pleiadians step up, that they have an obligation to right some wrongs, that the situation that we're in because they did not fulfill a promise after Atlantis to protect Earth. They didn't do it.
The Andromedans say that Earth was moved by the Pleiadians. Why would they do that? Let alone, how could they do that?
Oh, that isn't difficult to do. I mean, it only takes several very large motherships where you form a grid around the Earth, and you can literally use the gravitational field and pull it or move it forward. I mean, that isn't difficult. Solar systems are built today by extraterrestrial races. They can do that. They can, bring moons that are just floating out in space and put them around planets. They can move planets closer, further. They can take an ice planet, move it closer to a star so that the ice melts, and now there's water. They can do all kinds of things. This type of engineering, planeteer engineering, I don't know that there's actually a word for it, can be done and has been done. And it's the same here with Earth. There was a point where we were actually too close after a direct hit with another planet, and they were able to move it further away from the sun, which was a good thing. Okay, so this can be done, and that in itself was not necessarily a mistake. Okay, the mistake that many people make is that they think that because these extraterrestrials can come 100 million light years, 140, 230, 600 light years across the galaxy to Earth, that they have to be all-knowing and omnipotent. Absolutely not the case. It's just simply not the case. I mean, look at our own hidden space program. We know it exists, and they have remarkable technology. And they have probably, in all realistic, have tried to leave the solar system and could leave the solar system to travel to other stars. We have the technology, the Montauk information, the star chambers information. We have enormous technology that we've reverse engineered. But it's one thing to have the technology. It's another thing to have spiritual wisdom. And that's where we're really in trouble here, is we don't have the spiritual wisdom to know how to use these tools. And we're like new kids on the block who get that brand new Stingray bike, and the first thing we do is run through the intersection, with it. Cars hitting the brakes and horns blowing and, people screaming, watch out, because we don't know what we're doing, And this is where it creates problems for other races, especially, Rick, especially when you look at the Earth herself and you look at all the issues that are going on Earth that we just simply don't want to resolve. We refuse to resolve. And here we are going to just leave Earth and take that energy out into space? They don't want any part of that. There's no place for that. They've already been through this. They don't want this they don't want this kind of insolence out there. Okay? There's no place for it. And we have a place in the galactic family, but we have to also know that place. And knowing that place takes a tremendous amount of introspection. Really genuinely looking at ourselves. Let's go back to some of the things that were said very early in the contacts. Before the A's actually decided to intervene, there was a great deal of discussion regarding Earth within the Andromedan Council. Now, that is where a lot of planetary systems meet. It isn't run or owned by the A's. It's a location, so they call it that. Okay, it's easy for everybody in that area to meet there. And there were many that were opposed to doing anything to help us. And let's focus on those reasons. They don't respect themselves. They don't respect each other. They don't respect their home planet. What is their value? Now let's look at the Earth. Let's look at ourselves today. Has it changed any? Has it changed any? We have free energy. We have free technology. Okay, we have the technological means to create that. And yet, we're about to fight World War III over oil? You know? So we can drive our cars and our trucks when those engines have been obsolete for 70 years? We know this. This isn't rocket science. This is out there already. Okay? We're looking at a war over water when instead of feeding the military-industrial complex, we could be building desalination plants all over the world so everybody could have water, so they could grow crops. But are we doing it? Hell no. Why would we want to do that? Why would we want to empower people to grow food and take care of themselves? Then we can't control them. This is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm talking about.
So
It's
back to the
tweaked.
Pleiadians. Let me get a little history on the Pleiadians. Tell me about what Atlantis was and how the Pleiadians were involved in it.
Atlantis was an extraterrestrial colony. There were many races coming and going. It was kind of the analogy that I've been given was like a truck stop. You had planetary systems moving in and out of our galaxy, and this was one of the stops. One, because of its location. Two, because of its minerals, its amazing different type of life forms. And many of those life forms were brought to Earth in full form, just so you know. Which is why we can't find, the evolution in the fossil record. It's because they were brought here in full form. So it was a colony. There were many races coming in. Many of them were human, many of them were not. There were all kinds of experiments going on here. You had human extraterrestrials, the giants, commingling with women of our world, leaving offspring. Many of them became royal lines. Others were hunted down and killed by other races because they were half-breeds. So and if you remember in the early notes, VA said that prejudice was an extraterrestrial perspective. This was something that we had been taught by the extraterrestrial races themselves, which clearly shows, they had some maturing to do. They were going through a growth curve. Hopefully all those races have, but apparently not, because we still have some regressive races that are here doing their thing. Hiding behind us, essentially. It was an extraterrestrial colony, which is why it was so technologically advanced. People were coming and races were coming and going. And that all ended in a war, in another war. And, from what I understand, it was the Pleiadians who took out Atlantis. So, and that's a whole nother conversation.
You also, I think, expressed that the Andromedans said that those left behind on Earth were supposed to be protected by the Pleiadians.
Yes.
And what happened there?
They left. They didn't stick around. And other races came in. And not only took refuge, but created underground colonies for themselves, and essentially began the very slow process of managing us, controlling us, and at some point they started using us as a natural resource.
Are those the ones that have created the program, as you call it?
They're a very integral part of the program. That is correct.
How has the moon and those other races associated with the moon affected Earth humanity, and what's the history there?
Oh God, that's no small question. What I've been taught was that the moon showed up somewhere around 11,600 to 12,000 years ago. It was brought here. We know it's hollow. It came from, I believe, Ursa Minor, from a star system called Chauta. And it used to be a craft of some sort. And, you know, in the early years of space travel, many of the planet-faring races now, when they first started, they didn't have all the natural resources to build huge craft. So what they would do is they would use smaller craft, and they would go out and try to capture moons, asteroids, things like that. And then what they would do is they would move them into their orbit safely, and then they would hollow them out and use them as spacecraft. Build the craft on the inside, so now they have all the raw materials they need on the outside. Build the craft, your propulsion system, your life support systems, things like that on the inside of these moons, and then they would use that as the craft. You know, as opposed to using all of your natural resources to build the shell of the ship. They didn't have to do that now, all right? It's just really smart. So, you know, briefly, that's the story of the moon. That's dealt with in Defending Sacred Ground.
Now, the Aryans, the Maldekians, how are they associated with the moon? And who are they?
Well, they're essentially the same. You know, if you look at the Aryan race per se, it's a combination of Orion, of a lot of different races. Let me just say that, of different human races. Now, my understanding is that during one of the last pole shifts, they hid underground facilities that were built for them in the Himalayas because it was going to be safe there. And after the pole shift occurred and things began to settle, they came out. But apparently not all of them have come out. There is still a very small group that live inside the mountain, underground, who literally want no part of the surface. So that's how I could address that. And I think this is documented in history books where the Anglo-Saxon race, the white race, you know, came out of the plateaus of the Himalayas in ancient history, and moved down through India and just, you know, migrated to different areas of the world. I also understand that they had some advanced technology that was used as well. They had access to that.
What's their influence been on humanity? Has it been positive, negative? What kind of influence?
I would probably have to say both. I would have to say both. You know, Rick, you could take any piece of information, any philosophical belief, and you know, you could turn it for positive or for negative. You know, but ultimately, the decision to buy into that belief system, whether it's light or it's dark or positive or negative, is us. You know, I mean, there have been a lot of ideas that have just gone by the wayside because nobody believed it, didn't want to believe it, and it wasn't of any use. Well, it's the same thing with the religions. You know, it can be used for positive or for negative, but ultimately it's the responsibility of the people who buy into that belief system to use it in a good manner, you know, or a negative manner. So it's like, you know, what was it, Flip Wilson when we were kids? The devil made me do it. You know, I mean, you know, how often have we heard that? Where in fact, you know, he made the choice to do it, you know, so.
Faust.
Yeah, Faust.
So, I know you've told me that in the last 5 years you've had limited contact, although you've had some in the last year with the Andromedans. But according to what you've come to understand in previous years about the moon, what's been occurring there in recent times, say the last 50 years, you've stated that the NSA has been operating bases on the moon since the spring of 1958. Now, a skeptic would say, how is that possible to keep such a secret hidden from the public for so long? And how did you get the information that the NSA has had bases on the moon since the 50s?
Okay. Well, it wasn't their base, but they were there sharing the base. Let's correct that. They were taken up there by the Greys. That's how they got there. There was an exchange of technology and personnel. We know this, but this goes back to 54, and there were even attempts at contacts even earlier than that. So there was in 54 the beginning of sharing of technology. Now that project, from what I understand, it's amazing. The first group and series of groups that went were known as the Black Monks. I don't know if it was Project Black Monk or what. But this has been going on for some time, and everybody thinks the government can't keep a secret. Well, they absolutely can keep secrets. I think in the beginning their intentions were good. I think they honestly wanted to get their hands on this technology. I think they thought that they were clever enough that they could take this technology, use it here, and at some point end the relationship. I think that they were arrogant enough at the time, I'm talking about our people that began this whole program, that they thought that they could trick the Greys out of this technology. We would have it, and at some point we could push them away, and we would have it, and we would be free, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Either that, or they were incredibly naive and just couldn't help themselves. I don't necessarily have that answer. But it has not gone the way they've expected it. And many of them inside the program know that they're in trouble, that this is an issue that they don't know how to resolve. And I can tell you that I know that there has been efforts to reach out to other races to help with this issue. The problem is, though, and what keeps coming back when there has been how do I put this? When there has been some face-to-face with benevolent races, what comes back is that these benevolent races will push back to the governments or to this group. Well, it was our government that did it at first. They say, look, you signed a treaty. You agreed to all of this knowingly. It's your responsibility. And apparently we were warned, not to go with these guys. So it's kind of a dilemma, actually. And but at this point, the benevolence will intervene. I absolutely believe they will intervene for the sake of humanity and not the sake of world governments. They're going to do, I believe, they're going to do whatever they can to protect the people, not the governments.
Was the 1969 moon landing a fake, or was it real?
I don't believe it was a fake at all, no.
Why haven't we gone back since 1972 or 73 to the moon?
Well, I don't think it was because of lack of interest. I think it had to do with the fact that we were told not to go back.
Who told us that?
I don't even want to get into that. I don't want to get into that. Next question.
All right. Okay. When Mornay shared with you their understanding of the relationship with the isness, which is like what some of us might call the one or God, they call it the isness, back in 1995, what was your reaction to it?
Awe. My reaction to it was awe because of the simplicity and how clean it was. And I immediately saw some parallels between what the Native American and other indigenous people had practiced as far as being a part of nature and appreciating nature and the grandeur of nature and watching nature and understanding the power and the presence of it, not only to heal but to create wisdom and to educate about who we are in our physicality. You know, for example, what most people don't understand is many of our herbal treatments that have been used for thousands and thousands of years. The indigenous people learned from the animals by watching the animals, knowing what plants to eat when they weren't feeling well. You know, I mean, we take it for granted because we think we have, you know, modern medicine, but most of modern medicine is recreating extracts found in the plant world. That's all it is. Except, you know, their stuff is really tweaked, you know, and it creates other problems for the body because it isn't real.
Okay, Alex, critics of contactees often make the argument that the whole ET UFO phenomenon is simply a ruse by attention seekers to create a cult following and pseudo-religion around themselves. Now, how would you answer these types of critics?
Well, you know, it's interesting. The contactees that I've met, none of them really want the attention. In fact, it's more disruptive and harmful to their lives than anything possibly could be. You know, with the exception of the Meyer case, where they create Fiju and you know, it's become radical that Billy's it and he's the one and it's only him and it's only about him. You know, other than that, I'm not aware of well, there is that guy in France, right? The Raelians or something like that, whatever they're called. You know, there is that guy. I think that for the love of the planet, most contactees who have come forward share the information because they believe it will help. It'll help give us some insight into what our issues are and our own self-identity, to realize we're not alone. That, you know, maybe there is a way for us to get some answers so we don't destroy our planet, destroy our ecology. You know, that there are some mentors out there, races who could mentor us through this transition that we're going through. As far as creating religions and cults, well, humanity has always done that. You know, that's why you've got the religions. I mean, you know, the Romans knew what they were doing when they were creating the religions of the East and the West, and creating Christianity. They knew what they were doing. I just, you know, the critics could find anything to bitch about anything. You know, they can, you know, they sit behind their computers and they say they can, you know, say whatever they want to say. But what would they do in the same position if they were being contacted? Would they shit their pants, or would they stand up and what would they do with the information? I'm sorry, you need to go away. I don't want any of this information because I'm afraid I'll create a cult. I mean, what is that? You know, what would they do? What would they do in this situation? You know, it's so easy to criticize the efforts of somebody else when you're not the one on the firing line. You know, it's always easy to be the armchair quarterback. You know, when you're in your living room and you're not on the floor or on the field having to make the call. It's always easy to second guess. You know, and you know, from my heart, those people who think they know when they don't know, you know, you deserve to be on the front line. You really do. You do. You deserve to be on the front line. You deserve to be attacked like you've attacked everybody else, so that you know that you don't know what you're talking about. It's that simple. And that's exactly how I feel about it after all these years of taking crap and having crap thrown at me and at my family and at my children. You know, you don't know what you're talking about. And it's gotten so bad that, you know, if you were to ask me, would I ever do this again? Would I ever go public again? The answer is Absolutely no. I would keep the information for myself, pass it on to my family, and tell the rest of humanity, forget it, because it isn't worth it. It just isn't worth it. You know, look at your history on how you've handled those who have tried to share wisdom. It isn't a good track record. So, but I wouldn't do it again. If I had to do it over, I wouldn't do it again.
And that's what led to your 5 years where you
Nearly 6, yes.
refused contact with the Andromedans?
Yeah.
And what prompted you to begin contact with them again? What made the difference for you? That brought you back?
Well, look at the condition of the world, and I'm a parent. I'm a parent.
So this is about your children.
Yeah. Yeah. Plain and simple.
All right, now come the easy questions.
Don't say that.
Who is humanity?
Who is humanity? Oh, you know, that's an evolving question. Who are we? You know, what is our sum total? You know, we've come from humble beginnings, primarily a slave race, mixed with extraterrestrial genetic races, other genetic races of extraterrestrial origin, or other planetary systems. Been experimented on. Just, you know, that's the $64,000 question. Who are we? I believe that's evolving as we are. What does it look like? You know, what does that look like when we have fully matured? You know, what does humanity look like? And I believe that it will probably be one of the few true representations of the entire galactic family living together as one. That's honestly what I believe. And, you know, through our physical body types, through our skin color, through all of our genetics, you know, just remarkable potential. You know, but we're evolving. We're moving closer to that.
You've also mentioned that some of us are from a higher frequency, a higher dimension. You've talked about the Patal.
I was told that in the Andromedan perspective, and this information was given to them by more advanced races than their own, in a harmonic or frequency density higher than theirs, that there is speculation that many of the souls on the planet come from a group soul called the Patal, and that group soul were also known in history, in antiquity, galactic antiquity, as the founders, who had moved through all the dimensions, through the different physicalities, and evolved spiritually to get, I guess, to the highest level. And some have decided to leave eternity and fall back into the concept of time, which is where we are today, where allegedly they are today, let me put it that way, here to help uplift and change, you know, this harmonic, what we know as third density, and to move it forward. And as we move forward, it creates a graduational type of procession of uplifting of frequencies for the others as well. It's an evolution, and allegedly that's what they think. You know, that's a very interesting subject, and you know, I know we're limited on time on the tape, but you know, I've dealt with some of that already in the earlier talks.
Let me ask you, some people would say that, you know, we're here because we've made mistakes in the past and we're kind of like spiritual renegades and this is our prison or this is our cell. We're relegated to this spot in the galaxy on the outer fringes. Other people say we're slow learners, we're spiritual idiots, and we've got a lot to learn before we're allowed into this, you know, heart of the galaxy and mix with the other higher frequency races. What do you what have you learned about those concepts? Are those valid or invalid, or what's your opinion?
Well, I think if Earth is a prison, it's because we believe it's a prison. But it could be that they're all right. I mean, if this is a place where we create our own physicality, we create our own reality, then they're all right. You know, if you believe this is a prison for you, then you're right. It's going to be a prison for you. If you believe this is a paradise and a school and a place for you to learn lessons and evolve and to learn love, then it's going to be a school for you, a university, really. You know, irregardless, we all know that it's a boot camp for the soul. You know, Earth is not easy. I think the true test of Earth is that, yes, it's physical, but it's kind of like being in a mirror. You know, what you think is immediately mirrored back to you. You know, if you walk around and, you know, whining that you're the victim, you know what? You're right. You're going to be the victim. You will create that reality for yourself. If you walk around projecting prosperity, you will create prosperity. It will come to you. You know, to me, it's like a hall of mirrors. That's what Earth is. And I, for one, feel extremely blessed to be here to learn these incredible lessons and to have these particular opportunities. You know, and I just wish more people looked at it that way, because you know, when you get to that place, it's very self-empowering. You know, and you know, you're willing to step up and do the things that you have to do. No, I am very thankful for the lessons that Earth has given me. But you know, in hindsight, you know, with all the things that we have to go through to learn to love, to feel, to be responsible, to experience anger and hate and abuse of power and all those lessons that we all go through many lifetimes here, would I add that additional class of, you know, dealing with an extraterrestrial race on a planet as paranoid as this? And the answer is no.
Now, earlier you said that you're convinced reincarnation is a reality. In fact, you were even given evidence of reincarnation by the Andromedans. They showed you something when you were young, something about your life history, your past. Can you share a little bit about that? And can you tell me a little bit about how our consciousness chooses what life or body to inhabit? And you have also talked about that Van Allen belt and that it plays a part in reincarnation as well in terms of your understanding of it. Let's talk about reincarnation for a little bit. Tell me what you feel about reincarnation.
When I was a kid, they had put this cap. It was almost like a metallic type of a yarmulke on my head. And immediately monitors came out of a wall out of nowhere, and I started being shown scenes of lifetimes. And this information was coming out of my own head, even though I consciously had no idea or a way to even tap into it. But I knew it was me. I mean, I was emotionally involved with every scene that I saw, and I knew that it was me. And, you know, that's not something that I can explain to people. You either just know or you don't. Well, I knew that was me. And from that moment on, I had a different perspective of life. Because I haven't been born and raised a Catholic. You know, I was an altar boy. You know, here, you know, what they teach you is that you're given this one life to get it right. And if you don't get it right and you make a mistake, you know, even though he's a loving and forgiving God, he's going to throw you into a fiery abyss for the rest of eternity. That's insanity. It's insanity. I mean, why would anybody believe that? Number one, okay? Number two, obviously that's not a loving and forgiving God. Okay, so it's, you know, in my mind, you know, being a kid, it was a lie. I just knew it was a lie. And reincarnation is not new. That many of the different cultures have talked about it. And in order to mature the soul, you would need more than one lifetime. I mean, you know, what do we live on average on this earth? Most people. 45, 50 years for the average. In the United States, it's 72, I think, 73. But outside the country, it's a lot less. And that's it. That's your window. Please, you know. So, you know, everybody has their own perspective on it, and absolutely everyone is entitled to their own perspective on it. I know that reincarnation is a fact, and I'm encouraged by the fact that it is a fact, that we get multiple lifetimes to figure things out, turn it over to learn specific lessons. Now, you know, what does that look like when creating a family to come into? I don't have those answers, Rick. I don't. I did ask the question once, where do souls go when they die? You know, and I was told that if there was a physical place, it would be near the Van Allen belt, where that is. That's what the A's had told me, but that's all the information they ever gave me about it. So, and that's all I know.
Now, in regard to human evolution, you've said that we must make the conscious decision not to spread hate. Why is this so important?
Well, what's hate? It's a lack of love. It's a lack of love. And a lack of love is destructive. It disintegrates things. If you look at some of the earlier notes where the Andromedans have talked about traveling through space throughout our galaxy and discovering cultures who had reached advanced maturity that had actually destroyed themselves because they lost their original intent. And I believe that the original intent is learning to totally and unconditionally not only love oneself, but love all. When you lose focus of that, things just begin to disintegrate perpetually, because you continue to justify creating a space of fear. And do love and fear exist in the same space? No, they don't. They're actually polarities, opposite polarities. So, many of the advanced extraterrestrial races have figured that out.
And so even if there was an opposing ET regressive race, they would do their best not to hate them.
Yes. Yes.
You've said that in this age that it's so important to know your neighbors. You've said that in your recent meeting with the Andromedans that your faith in friendships was reaffirmed. Why is friendship and why associate with neighbors, why is it so important, especially now, in these times? And let's end it with this question.
I've been blessed to have an off-world perspective of Earth. And it's a very tiny little planet compared to some of the others that are out there that have life on them. We are a community of people all living together, sharing a very, very small space. Okay? On a ball of water and land that is traveling through space. It is such a miracle, such a gift, if you could see it from that perspective. The reaffirming of friendship was, you know how I had not seen them in a very, very long time. And that initial reconnecting was if we had never been apart. And you know that when you're, and you know, we've all experienced that here on Earth, where we have had friends who we've never seen or we haven't seen for years and years and years, and then you either accidentally bump into them or something, and it's just like it's like you hadn't been apart. The conversation, the friendship picks up exactly where it left off. Those are gifts. You know, those are absolute moments of grace. And they should not ever be taken for granted. Because those relationships not only mirror back our own goodness and bring us joy and laughter and sharing, but they help complete us. and reaffirm, our purpose, and see good in people every day. And then, that's something I think we need to do, is we need to really focus on looking for the good that's in every day. I read the news every day. I know what's happening in the world, and sometimes it terribly gets me down and frustrated because I don't know what to do to fix the problem. Guys, we try to solve problems, right? We're wired that way. But at the same time, if the kids start laughing about something, it changes my perspective. It brings me joy. It makes me, it brings me back, to what really is important. And I think, what we started off this interview with, what's really important. These are the things that, humanity as a whole really needs to be focusing on. It can't be about money. I'll never forget the time that I did this presentation regarding money to Mornay and Phaseus, because they asked me to. And when the whole thing was over, and I spent a great deal of time putting together this presentation. Of course, I was naive because I figured, well, they didn't really know, they didn't understand. But of course they knew. They've been studying us for a long time. And when the whole thing was over, Mornay was very grateful. And Phaseus just looked at me and he goes, I don't understand. And I go, well, what is it that you don't understand? And he just looked at me and he said, I don't understand why you have to pay to live on a planet you were born on. And then, it's such a simple question, and it's haunted me ever since. And you know what, ladies and gentlemen? Ask yourself that question. Why do we have to pay to live on a planet we were born on? And who are we actually paying for the privilege of being alive here? Who made them the boss? Who put them in charge? Think about that.
Alex.
And have a rum and coke.
Alex,
I'm kidding.
Thanks so much for spending the time with me today, and with all the people that are going to get to be able to see this. And we all thank you in advance. And we thank you for everything you've done in the past, sharing all your experiences. And a lot of us recognize the pain and sacrifice that you've gone through in sharing this. And we all just want to remind you that we really appreciate it and thank you.
Peace out.